Good evening, Dr. Parekh. How are you?
Oh, very well, Farah. Thank you so much for making time for this. You've just been amazing in your support of the book. So thank you very much.
No, Doc, we are very excited about your book. I was hoping, I have it on e-book, but we were hoping the hard copy comes out soon. It's about everyone. It's about the coronavirus, and Doctor actually wrote it. Did you start writing it in January itself?
Yes, started at the end of January, picked up really in the beginning of February.
But how did you know in January that this pandemic was going to hit the rest of the world? I mean, everyone else was pretty much oblivious. Everyone said, "ये China का problem है."
I think in medical circles, particularly those of us who are passionate about research, the ominous signs were fairly clear by the middle of December. And there was a pattern. Earlier, there was a SARS epidemic which began in China.
Yes.
For
Yes.
3 months, they were secretive about it, and then it spread everywhere else. So when early reports came of something that was going on in Wuhan, which seemed odd, medical journals like the Lancet were already talking about it. And although at that point I never imagined that this would become what it has become today, in January they started locking down Wuhan. Now it's difficult in today's times, Farah, to
That
lock.
late, huh? Because,
Pardon?
Doc, didn't it start in October, November in Wuhan?
It started around November. The Chinese kept it completely under wraps. Word was getting around in medical circles. But when you lock down a city which is the size of Mumbai, you can't hide it anymore from the world. So when the lockdown started, it became fairly clear that we are dealing with a monumental problem. So that's when I was reasonably sure that this would sweep around the world, because that's been the history of these kind of viruses.
Doc, there are so many questions that people have about COVID, which I would like to ask you. I did a bit of research before speaking to you, and I asked my friends what would they want to know. Um, the most common question is that if you get the coronavirus and you recover from it, is there a possibility that you can get it again, or then you're immune for life?
We're certainly not immune for life, but there is a small possibility that one could acquire it again within months. There have been cases in South Korea where people who had fully recovered have developed the illness again. So, but by and large, that doesn't happen. That's more the
So
exception.
it's not like chicken pox where you get it once and then you won't, you're not going to get it again.
Unfortunately, not, because the virus also keeps mutating. It changes its avatar every now and then. And so your body may not recognize the virus when it comes again in a different form. So one could get it again, yes.
So, so Doc, this lockdown that has happened, which everyone is now, I think, feeling the effects of it. How long do you see this continuing, and what will happen if they kind of open it out?
Right. So, and this is my guess, I could be wrong. I don't think the lockdown will continue much longer, because one has to measure the effects of the lockdown on people compared to what happens if there is no lockdown. So we've already seen there has been a lot of suffering due to the lockdown. We've seen the plight of our migrant workers, and the economy is going down. And we don't want a situation where more people die of poverty and hunger than of this disease itself. So I think the lockdown will need to be lifted. My guess is they will lift it up, and I think the Prime Minister has indicated that they lift it up in parts. They'll create zones, safe zones, where it will be lifted. Like Kerala, for example, has done a remarkable job. They're opening up. So I think they will open up selectively and keep monitoring at the same time. So a place that is opened up could get closed down again.
Yeah, because my fear is the minute that they say the lockdown is opened, everyone's going to run out like crazy people left out of a prison or something and just run on the streets. And then there'll be no point in having this lockdown for so many weeks, because it's all going to be one hotbed of people, I mean, we saw it yesterday, was the 20th of April, where they said they are going to ease out some things, and we saw photos of Western Highway and jam packed with, I mean, there was a traffic snarl over there. So I don't know, it's a bit scary whether should you go out or should you just keep staying at home?
See, Farah, as long as I've known you, as a very intelligent thinking woman, you've always anticipated the next step. Maybe it comes to you reflexively as a director. It's possible. Does that actually happen? You're directing a scene and you're already thinking of the next one and the one after that?
Yeah, I'm already thinking of the reviews that are going to come when I'm doing the scene.
Wow. So you're
actually, Doc, my husband Shirish is also, he's most of the time monitoring what's happening around the world. Like now we know in America, Texas, Georgia, they've kind of, it's civil disobedience going on. Everybody's just coming on the streets and kind of saying, our freedom of our right to be there, and they're not following the lockdown. Yes. But what is going to happen in a country like ours, which has, on a normal day, it's like jam packed, not on a day when everybody will be let out together.
See, we are already seeing problems during the lockdown, Farah, and I know Shirish must have discussed this with you. Yes, we are in a very bizarre situation where we are exhorting people to maintain social distance. We are, you and I and a few of us are fortunate to have the luxury.
True.
But we're a poor country. At the end of the day, we are a poor country, and many people.
I mean, if you're in a place like Dharavi, how can you maintain social distance?
Well, there is a way you can maintain it, and people are trying to do that. And the only way you can maintain is you step out of your hut, you spill over to the roads outside. But the moment these people come out, somebody is waiting with a stick to punish them, beat them, but basically drive them back inside. So we are giving them a contradictory message, maintain social distance, but go back into your house. So we already are facing this problem. I think we'll have to give clearer messages out to our people. And I think the Prime Minister is a good communicator.
Yeah.
And I hope he will convey effectively, both to the people and to the police, that we need to have a balance where people can step out without swarming the streets, and the police also can be a bit compassionate. Anyway, people sleep on the streets in our country. So if somebody comes out and maintains distance, particularly in the summer when it's going to get very, very hot inside the huts, I think they should be allowed to do that. I mean, we have huge gardens in the country. There are schools which are going to be closed in the summer. If we can adapt and allow people in, Shivaji Park can accommodate a lot of people. Azad Maidan can.
Doc, is it because it's also the first time any of the governments are dealing with a crisis like this? I mean, it's also the first time that there's no precedent like this, unless it was the Black Death in the 18th century, or the plague in early 1900s.
You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Farah. There have been precedents, but they are long ago. There have been recent precedents, but they've never been on this scale. So nobody in the world can be adequately prepared for something like this. It's saying that can a city be adequately prepared for a earthquake of magnitude 9 on the Richter scale? Nobody in the world can be prepared for that.
Yep. Yes.
And this is a natural.
So Doc, according to you, which of the places have handled this well, you think?
Oh, that's a great
around the world, who has handled it well?
That's a great question. The country that has handled this superbly is South Korea. They identified the problem early and they did 3 things. There are 3 things that a government needs to do. That is to test. Of course, some people say the 3 things the government needs to do are test, and test. But other than that, you need to test. Then we need to trace people, contact tracing, and we need to treat people. We should not forget that almost 85 to 90% of people will not get anything beyond mild symptoms like a cough and a cold, milder than our average flu. But they can transmit to other people. So if these people are isolated quickly, if they are quarantined, and South Korea has done a phenomenal job of it.
And Doc, what do you have to say about herd immunity? You know, at one time, Boris Johnson, I mean, the Prime Minister of Britain was wanted everybody to just go out and like get it and like who dies. I mean, herd immunity. So, you know, the economy does well, but people are dying all over the place. I mean, is there any merit in that sort of a cure?
As a long-term solution, it's inevitable. That's the nature of the beast. It's also the nature of the illness. It's also the nature of human beings. So this whole interaction is such that many people will fall ill. Actually, many people will die. And of those who survive, there will be a kind of herd immunity. What does the herd immunity do? It means that for some time there is a respite, but the virus mutates and comes back like the flu virus does. You know, it comes around every now and then. The SARS virus too has been coming around every now and then. So herd immunity will give us a respite, maybe even for a year or two. And when it comes back, few people will succumb. But I think that's a rather cruel way to look at the problem. You know, let people die and then the survivors will go on with the world.
In the survival of the fittest, which is we've been, I mean, down the ages.
Yeah, but you know, Farah, the tragic
irony coming down to survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah, yeah. But the tragic irony of it is soon after saying it, he almost died. Boris Johnson himself developed the illness. He went into the ICU. For 2 days, people did not know whether he would even survive. He managed to come out. And, you know,
so I think some people need to get it before they realize the dangers of it.
I think so. I think as many things in life, only when you experience it, you know, to realize what it is.
So, there's another question. I don't know if it's been addressed in the book. My daughter wants to know if animals can get COVID, and you know, particularly in the beginning, there was panic and people were abandoning their pets on the road, which, you know, it's highly cruel. It's like taking a family member and dumping them on the street because you. So, is there any sort of truth in that? Can like dogs and cats and your house pets get COVID and transmit it?
Yeah, which of them? Is it Diva?
No, of course, Anya would ask this question.
Yeah, Anya the artist, Anya the animal lover, Anya the fundraiser. Is she around?
Is yes, she is.
Hey, Anya, say hi to me, baby.
And say hello to Anya. Say hi. Sit down here. Say hi.
Hey, Anya. Hi, hi, Anya.
Stop kicking my phone. Come
Anya, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud. Anya, I'm so proud of the great work that you're doing. And I hope you'll make me a drawing. Oh, there's Diva. Diva is the director. So yes. I'm so proud of all of you. You know, Mom and Dad have done such an incredible job of bringing you up to be grounded and level-headed. And I don't think too many people are aware of the great work you all are doing towards COVID-19. And I know, Anya, you've been making these beautiful drawings. I hope you'll make one for me too. I'm going to put in a request. But to your question, you know, the strange thing, and I think this will, you know, make you feel happy. Animals cannot give it to us. I mean, other than bats and pangolins and all.
Yeah.
Our domestic pets cannot transmit COVID-19 to us. There is no evidence anywhere in the world. But there is a case report, only one case report, and that too in Hong Kong, where a human being gave it to their pet dog. And the dog was weakly positive. Dog survived, didn't get any symptoms. Okay. So, you know, people abandoning is absurd.
That's the message that needs to go out to, because people were so got it. So nobody's going to abandon their pets anymore. Go and do your homework now.
Oh, my poor thing. Yeah, but I'm glad she asked that question because, you know, we have to worry that we are more dangerous to those animals than they are to us.
Doc, is there anything that we need to know? Because, I mean, by the time your book comes out, we are hoping, you know, the printing press starts soon, because it's a very topical book that people need to buy and read. All the myths and all the misinformation that goes around is all addressed in your book. Is there anything else that you need to tell us? What, you know, just.
No, I mean, first of all, Farah, once again, I cannot thank you enough, not just for doing this program, but you were amongst the first readers of the book. And having gone through the book, you were kind enough to tweet immediately. And your tweet, as everything else you do, you know, influenced a lot of people who then started inquiring about the book. So you gave it the initial traction, propulsion.
Because a doc is clearly something that we need at this time to, because the fake WhatsApp messages and all sorts of, I mean, you hear of insane kindness, and then you hear of really insane cruelty that people do just because they're scared and self-preservation kicks in.
So that's one of the things we mentioned in the preface, that a pandemic like this can bring out the best in us, and
Yes.
sometimes the worst in us, and sometimes both. But I have a question for you. I mean, how
Yeah.
is Shirish and you been managing? I mean, my image of Shirish is always on a laptop, writing a script, or doing something like
So
that.
for him, it's a normal life goes on, because he's sort of quarantined himself for a long time. He's not a social person. He's mostly in his office or writing. Now his movie is going to come out, so he was busy with that. But luckily, we don't have FOMO.
Right.
I'm finding that a very big side effect of this pandemic.
Right.
People, you know what FOMO is, no, Doc?
Yes.
The fear of missing out.
But I'll tell you what. The two of you, and I'm not saying this just to reciprocate being nice to you, but Firoza and I believe this, from the depths of our heart. The two of you are the most hands-on parents we have seen. Y'all are so involved in bringing up.
Y'all are seeing we know a lot of hands-on parents, but
No, but I'll tell you, I don't think you know too many of them in Bollywood. Not that I'm aware of, but or people who are professionally as successful. I shouldn't say Bollywood, but even doctors. But the amount of time the two of you have invested in these children, and the results are already showing. And so I think this lockdown, in a sense, is a mixed blessing, because the children get more of you. You are spending far more time with them.
Yes, I'm actually enjoying their online school.
Right.
Because I know they're just a door away, and the commuting time stops. And I want to also, Doc, I mean, this is how it's going to be in the future? I think a lot of things are going to be online, right? A lot of people will have to work from home. I mean, unless it's essential that you need to be out of your house to work. I mean, the schooling is going on perfectly well, and hats off to the teachers, because I know that they have to cook, clean, make their, clean their house, cook their food, and still come and sit in front of the laptop and teach the children in the day. So do you see that social distancing is how it's going to be a way of life? I mean, at least till a vaccine is found.
Farah, that's a profound philosophical question, and we are addressing it in the next edition of the book. Many people say the last extinction event was when the asteroid 65 million years ago hit the Earth, wiped out the dinosaurs.
When the dinosaurs disappeared,
and made it possible as humans for us to come and take over the Earth. We are using the phrase a cultural extinction event. I mean, this is not a physical extinction event. We will undoubtedly survive. We will emerge stronger, but I hope we emerge wiser. That I'm not so confident of, but we'll emerge stronger. But it's a cultural extinction event. Things are going to change. The way we live, the way we interact, the way we think. For example, I've done something I could never have done before, and that is I'm doing online consults with my patients. And to my great surprise, they're enjoying it, and so am I.
Yes, I think people.
Yes, I think people are going
to
enjoy.
My son is thoroughly enjoying online school, because his shyness, he says, he's overcome his shyness now, because there's no peer pressure. There are no four boys sitting to make fun of him from behind. So he's.
Well, I saw his video. I saw that.
That's because his sister is. That's because he was alone and his sister was shooting it. So he's not shy in front of his sister.
But he's shy in front of the camera.
He's profoundly shy. I mean, even when he meets you, or when I bring him to Dr. Firoza's event, they are very self-effacing. I don't know, very quiet kids. They've gone on Shirish, obviously, not on me. I think that's. Doc, do you think a vaccine will be developed sooner or later?
Undoubtedly, a vaccine will be developed. But, just a thought, they're saying in America that perhaps this is the end of the handshake. that maybe for 2 years now people will not shake hands.
Yes.
We do it.
Yes.
And I was reading up on the handshake, and it has a very interesting history, which you're probably aware of. And that is 200 years ago, people took out their right hand just to indicate to the person coming across that they were not carrying a gun with which they would kill them. They pulled it out to say, look, my hand is empty, and they shook hands as a way of reassuring the other person that no violence is intended. Now we may have to put our hand back to indicate no violence, no biological violence is indicated.
Doc, in that sense, India was way ahead of everyone. We just do a namaste for years, and I mean, it shows honor, welcome, all sorts of things without touching the other person.
Absolutely. So, but to come to the vaccine, I'll tell you what my concern is and what I'm excited about. Of course, I'm excited. There are already developments in the vaccine, and sooner or later it'll be around, maybe in a year, maybe a year and a half at most. But that's just the beginning of our problems. You have to scale up production for billions of doses. You have to distribute them. You have to administer them in a fair and equitable manner. But if they get cornered by the wealthiest countries in the world and people within a country, then there's an ironic situation, because the people who don't get vaccinated will allow the virus to breed. They will harbor the virus.
Right.
The virus will mutate and come back and hit the people who have been vaccinated. So a phrase we have used in the book, we didn't coin it, but we've used it in the book, that as long as one of us is unsafe, all of us are unsafe. And you probably heard what the US government tried to do, or what Donald Trump himself tried to do. There was a biotech company in Germany, which had some early progress in vaccine development. The moment US scientists informed Trump, he wanted to go and buy up that company so that all the vaccines would come to the US and not go anywhere else. And then the German people got very upset, and they prevented their government, not that the government wanted to sell it, but they said, don't even think about it. So I think our great thing will be the vaccine coming in. Our tragedy will be if we cannot make it available to all.
But Doc, don't you think this is a time when all the countries in the world have to come together to not only share vaccine information, but because it's, in that sense, it's just, destroying everybody together.
Absolutely. And I think, people like
these petty things of war and this and that, and all, it's all looking so petty now because there's such a big global kind of threat that encompasses everybody.
Absolutely. But, here's the tragedy. The
Except maybe China.
No, they've been hit badly too. They have been hit in a way, and we've covered.
They are not sharing information. They are not sharing anything.
Yeah, but their One Belt, One Road initiative is now one disaster. That's what we called it in the book. That is going to be one big disaster. The other day, Tanzania refused to even take a loan from them, an unconditional loan, saying, we don't want to be trapped. So everybody is going to get affected. But, unfortunately, Farah, the brightest of us, are making films, are working in hospitals, are frontline workers, are even nurses. But on the other hand, you have the Donald Trumps, the Boris Johnsons of the world, and they have a far greater say than you and I.
I think this is the time to realize who actually are real heroes. I just read somewhere there should be a world where the healthcare workers are paid more than footballers and cricketers at that level. And maybe they are really the soldiers who are going on the front line, and
And you know what I've realized?
Even in Georgia and all, when people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, what I've realized that I hope permanently, now of course it has, this hierarchy within healthcare workers is demolished once and for all. Because, we've had a hierarchy where the doctor kind of, is higher than the nurse, who's higher than the ward boy. But in this illness, everybody is fighting at the same level. Nurses and ward boys are doing things that doctors cannot do. And I hope that there is a sudden leveling within the healthcare system where people suddenly realize that, the ward boy who brings the bedpan.
I'm hoping that they are really, once we sort this out, that they are the ones that are actually rewarded, and not only awarded, but rewarded. They should really be given tax cuts and bonuses, and they're really, I mean, they're the soldiers, you know. If there was a war and our soldiers were going, I mean, these are the soldiers. In Georgia, I was telling you, when the entire all Trump supporters came out on the road, it was the nurses who stood on the road to stop them and to send them back home. All of them came and stood in a line. I mean, it's such a cinematic moment. You
So
know, you can make a film only on that.
on that note, you know, Shirish could write a script and Farah could direct a film in which
Yeah.
a nurse or a ward boy, you know, would be the Shah Rukh Khan of the film.
True.
No?
They are right now. I mean, they are the true heroes. Doc,
Great.
anything else you want to tell? I wanted to ask you about the second wave of COVID. You know, China is now facing a second wave.
Yes. Yes, they
You
are.
know, they opened for a time and then there was a second wave. So how dangerous can that be? Does the book address that?
No, because we didn't anticipate it in January or February when we started
Okay.
writing about it. And actually, nobody anticipated it even, 10 days ago, because had they, then they wouldn't have opened up. But the second wave is not so bad for us. You know,
Okay.
because obviously we've learned a lot from what we are going through. So even China has opened cautiously, and this time they're fully prepared to test, to trace, to isolate, treat the people who are showing up. So even in South Korea there was a bit of a bump, but those were very trivial compared to the sharp rises that occurred the first time.
Okay.
I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Doc, thank you so much. Is there anything you wish to ask me?
Yes, actually I do. And, I am one of the people who can give a lot of theoretical advice, which comes from reading and writing. You've been there hands-on in a sense. What advice would you give us, which we can include in our book? And what advice would you give to our viewers about how they can cope with the lockdown?
Doc, I really can't give any advice, because in the beginning I had also got very stressed, and I used to wake up at 5 in the morning, and I can empathize. I know how it would be to get up and think that we don't know when the next paycheck is coming, or how am I, not that I have to pay rent, but I've been through, I've been poor in my life, and there's a insecurity at all times. So I don't know how I can advise people, but I can advise people who are not being sensitive at this time. You know, I'm seeing a Mary Antoinette kind of scenario playing out. You know, where there's one which is flaunting their privilege all over social media, and you know, it's all about the food you're cooking, and I'm so grateful to the pandemic, and I want to break the lockdown and go walk up to those people and give. But on the other hand, they're just average people who are just going out on the taking chances, going out to feed stray dogs, you know, going out to give rations to people. But I guess the thing would be to take this as a pause. Like you said, it's a pause.
Right.
You know, and this is a once in a lifetime occurrence. I mean, no one before us has ever been through this. So you treat that, you take this time to spend time with your family, and you realize how trivial other things have been, because in the end it's the family that you're going to be with, you know. And I think you take this time to teach your children, because they're going to learn through not through preaching, but what they see is how they see their parents behaving is how they are going to turn out. So I guess this is the time to do that.
But you know, Farah, am I correct in assuming that you do have a message? In fact, you have two messages in the same breath. Your message to the people who are suffering is that I understand what you've gone through. I have experienced some of this myself. But the unsaid message in that is, see where I've reached today. I mean, you're not one to flaunt that, but you are saying, see where I am today, and you too can do it, and this too shall pass. So that I see as your message to people who are suffering. To the ones who are flaunting and doing all this, you've very eloquently said what you had to say. I don't need to paraphrase it or repeat it. So I think what you've said is so profound. But I think you're also giving a message to others that this will pass. We need to understand it. And more important, what you said earlier, this is not a time to look for any borders between countries, between social classes.
Yeah. I think finally, I'm so sad that this is how the world has become one.
Yeah,
You know,
a
it's a
tiny
war against the world.
virus,
So this is how we've all become one.
yeah, a tiny invisible virus has just leveled all of us.
Yes, thank you so much, Doc.
Okay.
I'm urging everyone to get a copy of Doctor's. Please tell me the entire name of the book again, Doc, so that people can book it on Amazon.
So the book is called The Coronavirus: What You Need to Know About the Global Pandemic. We've kept the title very simple and in a sense sellable. So that's the title. And
Yes, and it is written by Dr. Rajesh Parekh, Dr.
Mahira Desai, and Swapnil Parikh, who's my son, our son.
Yes. How good that he has done this with you, Doc. So,
yes.
Yeah. So love you, Doc. Thank you so much for not only writing this book, I mean, but also I think you should come regularly on TV and address people's questions on how to deal with this and the myths that surround it.
Thank you so much, Farah. Love you lots, and thank you for making time.
Okay. Be safe, Doc.
Sure. Thank you so much. Bye. Thanks. Bye.